So those enhancements actually, they are actually, as per the setup we saw, it is a context of helping the application to be as fast as it can be and gives actually the user a better experience, and the sense of giving him the chance to ameliorate the time used or when surfing the application or asking for the services within the application in question. So we presented the state management and we presented last class the context of the sessions. Just let's continue from that stage. Uh, we, as per the definition of the state management, actually it is a context of helping us uh, gaining time by avoiding the round trips, in the sense of whenever a client asks for a resource or a service or a page or a control or a value from the back end, from the database or something in background, the server has to accept and has to process and has to submit the response back. So there is a time of processing and let's say resubmitting the answer and so on. So this circle here, the client submits the request to the server. The server has to accept, process, and then after submit the response back to the client. This process, it takes time. It is a time-consuming process when we compare it to a local value to be displayed only from the client to the client itself. Because to submit a request, the the list of tiers in between consume time to pass the request from the client to the server. We know what are the traits, the tiers, sorry. And the same way, to submit the response from a server to the client, the tiers in between consume time to pass the response. Thus, the state view, actually, it is one of the solutions. The state view, actually, it is one of the solutions, actually, that enhances the time consuming by avoiding round trips. Request submitted to server and response submitted from server to client. By just utilizing the local memory to utilize the form of visits of the client. What he visited earlier, he actually would actually have to utilize from local memory. He will not actually, the client will not ask the server to submit the request again. The client will find his resource from his local memory or his local cache. View state, these are all of the view state. It is not the unique technology. Mary Moyo come late. The technologies they are not actually only the view state, which is enhancing such process, but also the sessions. They are another view via which we can see the time consuming be reduced, and then after we see enhancements in the action when a client visits or just uses an application. This context actually mainly it is within the dynamic applications. Why? Because it would give a clear enhancement, because the dynamic application has to search and process a request, and this takes time to procure a response. For a static application, this time is much more minimized because we do not have to make the server process and search for the correct answer. He would immediately procure a page and display it. Nothing to search. It's everything is ready. It's static. But for the dynamic context, no, it is much more consuming. It is much more time consuming. The amelioration of those processes, the amelioration of the time consuming and the let's say the betterment of the use and to enhance the richness of a web application or web solution or dynamic web solution in general, it is to be done through two categories: either ameliorating the client side options or ameliorating the server side options by using technologies that they run on the client side or using technologies that they run on the server side. It's not a context of selection, either this or that. No, actually, technologies they are available from both sides. You can go for the technology that they enhance the client side technologies, client side, sorry, options and work and flow, Or you can go for the technology that enhance the server-side behavior, or you can go for both if the application needs, if the request is requiring that. So if the application is complex enough and you are required to do a betterment from all sides, you can go for both if the application admits that. I insist on if the application admits that, means to go for both options. So this is the context of the process itself. Do we need or not? It is not a context that you have to do or you don't have to do. No, it's not like that. Technologies are available. We just have to respect the syntaxes and we apply them. We deploy them to the final application. Let's just dig in and see what are the technologies which are actually to be seen, whether they are client side or server side, and what are those technologies even. Actually, the sessions and the, if you say they are one of the very good example to segregate. Sessions, they are server side. Sessions, since they are actually storing values in the server side, and they are actually helping the user to find the value immediately without researching it and without reprocessing it again. It is available for you for all pages without any reprocessing. And the view state, we defined that earlier. We said that it is a context of avoiding round trips to gain time, but it is in the client side. Let's go on. Let's go on and let's explain more to see actually more details. As per examples of client-side technologies that they enhance the work consumer and the behavior of the dynamic applications, we state this is not a limit, but this is a very good and common and very popular enhancements to be done on the client side to enhance the behavior of the designed dynamic application or web solution. Hidden fields, actually, as per a field, what is it? It's a simple text, for example, in a form to register for a given, let's say, a system or application or website. You type your username, your password, your email, your contact number, your whatever, address, and so on. You'll type them where? In a text, in a list of text boxes, because you see them on your screen. Web applications, they can refer to hidden text fields. Hidden fields means things that the client does not see. They are available, but they are not displayed to hold values to help the user search faster, process his requests faster, and so on. Hidden fields. Why you are coming late today? What's the problem with you? No, well, اللي ما عاد هقول. Can I receive an answer? Why you are coming late? Bernard, are you here?
Yes, mister.
Yes, Mister.
Okay, let's continue. Let's continue. The second, actually, as I said, they are not of the matter of examples only. So those are very famous, and we can find them, and we can find others also to enhance the client side work behavior. The view state, we define that it is a context of avoiding round trips. The cookies, they are sort of files to store the history of the client, in addition to some profiles like the operating system, like the web browser visited, like the web pages and the URLs visited, and so on. Cookies, they are files that they store the history of the user. Query strings, they are context of ready-made queries to help the user just click a button to find a solution. Not need it does not need him to write queries or write text sentences and phrases to search for something. He just clicks a button and everything is done. Clicks a link and something is happening immediately. So query store the query strings, predefined. All of them, they are coming in the client side only. For the context of the server side, actually, you can find the sessions as we defined earlier, which are actually holders to hold values to help the user use those values across the web solution, the full web solution, not the web page only, but the full web application, the full web solution. Actually, also application state, which is a context of defining the technology used by the application, and to help the whatever the server actually process the request of the client faster, something like that. So we have a state to manage. We have a state to manage the graph here. We have a state to manage. This state actually it is for the purpose of enhancing the behavior of the designed web solution. And this enhancement, whether to be from the client side or from the server side, you go for this or for that. It is a question of the application itself. You cannot go for this or that because you decided, you only know. But because of the request you are managing, or let's say the application you are dealing with, or the request you are requested to do, needs you to enhance from both sides or from one of the two sides. So by that we decide we go for using technologies from the at the client side or at the server side. Any questions here, please?
No, Mr.
Okay, great, great. One step further, define the technologies that helps us design solutions, design dynamic solutions, is the configuration. To design well dynamic solutions that we can deliver over the web for the public use. I repeat, to design well configured dynamic solutions to be deployed in public over the web, over the www environment. We have to go for the configuration. Let's say side. ASP.NET helps us configure what we design as dynamic solutions using a predefined configuration file nominated Web.config. Web is the name of the file. The extension is config.config. This is an extension config, like any file that has an extension. Like the habitual ASP.NET files, the web ASP.NET files, they are having the extension dot. What is the extension of the ASP.NET files? .aspx. .aspx. So the .config is the extension of the files in plural that they are actually considered to be a configuration resource for a designed web solution. Usually we talk about the dynamic solutions also. Why? Because for a static view, we do not have to worry about the configuration. It's something fixed. Does not require modification or intellectual or, let's say, cognitive behavior from the application side. No, we need only a simple thing to be displayed like it is. An image to be displayed like it is. A text field to be displayed like it is. A group of controls to be displayed like they are. No chance to modify anything. This is static content. But when we talk about the dynamic content, we design the dynamic solution. No, things to be displayed according to the client request. What the client requests, the outcome would be. It is not something that the application specifies and that's it. You cannot touch, or the client cannot modify or display differently. No. It is something completely under the control of it is completely, let's say, under the control of the client. So thus, a web.config file would help enough to control who can use, when can use, where can use, using what can use, software to run, the solution, hardware to run the solution, and so on. And if there are external resources also, we can have to specify them within the web.config. Can you give me an example of the web external resources that we can, I was talking now, that we can mention inside the web.config file? I submit to you, actually, I've given you 0 in the question of today. If you check your email, none has answered the question, none of you. I given you 0, and you received that in email. So if you'd like to have the 1, and they change your 0 to 1, answer the question. Can you give me an example of an external resource that can be mentioned inside the web config? External resource means something that we need to help the ASP.NET solution to run. Example of external resources, what can be? Can you give an example? Think well. We have an application actually that it is built in ASP.NET, a web page that has images and text and buttons and controls and so on. What example of external resources that can be actually mentioned here in the web config in order to be utilized inside the totality of the web pages? Can you give an example of an external resource, please? External resource. مصادر خارجية. مصادر خارجية. هل من نموذج؟ هل من مثال؟ أمل. هل من مثال لمصادر خارجية تمثل ضرورة لاستخدامها داخل كل الصفحات ونذكرها، نقوم بذكرها وتحديدها ووضع مسارها داخل الويب دوت كونفيج؟ أمل العامري. أني نموذج بليز. Electricity. It's okay, Arwa. It's okay, Arwa. Okay. It's very simple, actually. Since we actually, as per the beginning of the first classes we saw, and we said that the dynamic application, it has to use an store in background. External resource I was talking now to put them in the web.config. What can be actually a store, a data store? We're going to see in unit number 2, if you pass through the book, we're going to see actually as per the TNA, if you saw that we're going to see the unit number 2, which is the databases. So data stores, their paths, their properties, specificities, all what we're going to use in background can be mentioned inside the web config. So those are examples of external resources. The web.config solutions, they are actually a sort of an XML resources. As per the XML, they are actually a tag-based scripting language that has a similarity with the HTML. Something can be rendered immediately, does not require a long life cycle like the ASP.NET web pages. No, it has a shorter life cycle since it is capable to be rendered immediately and can be displayed. Its content can be displayed, understood, and displayed by the client used by the user. Any questions regarding the web.config, please? Any questions regarding the web.config? Any requests? Continue to describe this XML actually based, let's say, configuration files, the web.config files. When I say web.config, actually this is the name of the file that we can utilize to configure a list of resources inside a web solution. So the XML based configuration resources or files, or yes, files, they are actually having the capability, and they have to be actually readable by the human, since we said they are built using the XML technology, and the XML is something similar to the HTML. So the HTML you can read, thus the XML you can read. Actually, they have to have the chance to detect if any actually modification or changes has been happened to the ASP.NET application in question, and they have to act immediately. Means whatever the resource has been configured from within the Web.config, they have to control the behavior of the ASP.NET solution. Those web.config, those web.config or the XML-based those configuration files, they are actually to be built from within the IDE in question. Actually, we described that we are going to use the Visual Studio, so we can use the Visual Studio itself to build, implement those the web.config. But in addition to that, actually, we can go for building a separate and a standalone configuration files in plural using a simple text editor. We can use a text editor, simple text. A notepad can be used for that. Yes, we can use a notepad to create or configure or edit a web.config file. Absolutely. Yeah, using a text file. It is not mandatory to be through the IDE only. Great. 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 When we said that the enhancements of the web applications, it is to be done from two phases, whether from the client side or from the server side, actually. The options of setting up, for example, we take the example of the view state, which is to avoid the round trip. And the round trip, it is to send a request again and again to ask for the same resource, the same page, the same control, the same, let's say, value again and again and again from the client to the server, from the client to the server, from the client to the server. This is a process that the view state avoids that. So it will enhance the time consumed. This process, it can be actually controlled using a simple JavaScript method or predefined method to control, yes, this view state would be actually validated, it would be put in action or not. There is a predefined method, actually, it would be actually utilized within the ASP tags or ASP.NET controls, buttons, text boxes, labels, all the controls that you can utilize, the controls that they are defined by the .NET framework. This JavaScript solution would either enable or disable all your view state, let's say, configurations. Means to enable the view state and this round trip elimination process, you have to have a do postback request. Means you have to either enable this or disable it to succeed or to finalize the view state behavior. We'll stop here. Example of this is actually simple text field. This is a hidden text field as we described, and the hidden fields, they are a client-side enhancement. So you can use hidden fields to hold a value, to store a local value, to pass a hidden value from a client to server, all to avoid the round trips, or for the purpose to minimize the time of processing. In order to ask 2 times the client to submit 2 requests, he would just submit 1 request because of those hidden fields. List of properties described in the ASP.NET Postback methodology. Remember that it is a JavaScript solution. Remember that it is a JavaScript solution. It is actually to be run with the ASP.NET controls. Yes, means it's for example, you drag and drop a button and you drag and drop the text field or whatever the control you use from the .NET to control the view state, which is also an ASP.NET technology. It is a client-side enhancement. You have to refer to the JavaScript do postback method to enable or disable, to allow the resubmission or to disable the resubmission of a request when refresh is happening. I said to activate the view state, or to enable, sorry, the view state, or to disable it when a refresh has happened. Means he actually, as per this definition, this refresh actually, what does it mean? Either to reload the page again, or to resubmit a form or a control again. The event, it's whether it is actually the load or the pre-render, whether the load, refresh of the full page, just reload the page again. The do postback would be actually fired, or the pre-render methodology. It is a method here because why we are just calling a block. By this, actually, we come to an end of the ASP.NET. Here, actually, we can see an example of the technology that they can be actually rendered onto the web client solution, the browser, the HTML versions. Remember that the HTML has versions. We see HTML or HTML or HTML5 we talk today. Why? Because there are headers to be transmitted from the client to the server, and vice versa from the server to the client, to define and identify and help in authentication and access control mechanisms for different privacy and, let's say, permissions tasks. There are versions, you have to remember that. But at the end of the day, they are things that can be rendered immediately to the client, onto the client, sorry. The unique thing I'm gonna hear from this view, I'm gonna just state it, is that the XML, since it is different than the HTML, it has to be well formed. The XML, it is something similar. It is not the HTML, but it is something that you, as a human, me as a human, all of us as a humans, have to understand when we read the content. It has a structure to be well formed. Why? Because we can understand it. Because we can write lines, we can draw lines, we can draw colors. It is formed also, but we cannot understand. If you write symbols and numbers only in an arbitrary mode, but in a formed way, we can see, yes, but we cannot understand. The XML, no, it has to give us as humans an understandable view. As I said earlier, it is due to the headers. We are having different views, and the headers, they help us actually to raise up the context of the privacy, maybe to enhance the work experience with the web solutions by gain and time or something like that. So thus we see differences and versions. An example of a control, and we saw that it is not new to us. An IDE, the Visual Studio itself. Okay, view web design. View web design, it's the work with the design view. Actually, we saw that in the lab. Last class. We have, from within the IDE itself, we are having the capability to see here in the corner, left bottom corner. We have a design. Actually, we can work with the design view and with the controls from the toolbox. So this is the view, the VWD, which is the view web design feature that the .NET enhances. It is not because of the Visual Studio. No, this is an enhancement provided by the delivered through the .NET framework. The Visual Studio is only a tool to visualize that, to help us work with that. It's the API, it's the interface. But the technology is the .NET. The toolbox is the main source of the controls. The toolbox from the IDE here, it is the main source of the control. It controls all of the utilities we may drag and drop. You may use as pre-made functions to achieve your goal by simply dragging and dropping. Solution Explorer is one of the utilities. Solution Explorer is one of the utilities from within the IDE in question that helps us to surf amongst the tools, or let's say not the tools, amongst the resources we are using to build and to design a web solution. So we have a file, we have an image, we have, let's say, a database, we have a table, we have something actually, an external resource, we have a configuration file. All of them, they are to be displayed to us and given to us from within the Solution Explorer, where we can have the control. Great. We come to the context of the backstore, the databases. So it is another view from which we can visualize the data sources here, or data resource, the backstore, which is actually in our example here, we are going to deal with the databases. We are not going to explore much. We see that in unit number 2, do the SQL Server. Yes, visualizing data sources from the backstore or backstores in plural, we can use grid views. We can use predefined or preset controls for that. So a data store provides a source of data, and this source of data to be displayed in the front end page, or let's say resource. We need actually a visualizer, sort of a visualizer. Yes, the grid views or the grids, they are technologies that would enhance that would support that. Support, what does it mean? It means it would actually display the resources, the sources of data or the data themselves onto the client. Okay, we come to an end. Any questions, please, regarding this ASP.NET list of definitions and resources and, let's say, enhancements,
No.
features? Okay, great, great. Let me just launch the unit number 2. So, and let's move to the unit number 2. Okay. So I believe you are able to see the new window. Are you seeing the chapter number 2? Is it visual to you? Visualize it to you, please.
Yes.
That's great. So the second chapter is from the book number 2, from the second reference from our TNA. From our TNA is actually we are stating 2 books. The second book, which is the SQL Server 2008, actually it is we are utilizing to refer to this only unit number 2, chapter number 2 only, which is a unit that would help us actually understand and work with databases. And the database in question, database management system in question, is the SQL Server. It's a Microsoft solution, and it is 100% fully compatible with the .NET framework, and it works on top of that. It can give us actually a rich experience to work remotely on that by filling and sending requests through the .NET controls. So it is 100% feasible to use the SQL Server as a resource to accomplish an ASP.NET dynamic solution. I repeat, because of the definition and the capabilities of the SQL Server, we can accomplish the construction, development, implementation, and the deployment of an ASP.NET solution that uses the SQL Server as a resource, as a DBMS in background, as an engine of data, let's say, sources in background. Databases. Wait. Objectives. Objectives. Actually, we're going to deal with the basic and with more details with the simple starting from the simple actually side until the little bit more complex side, how we interact with the database. The introduction of the first, actually, I'm not going to explain those objectives because we are going to see them one by one, but just to bring our attention to is that the context of working with databases, we need technology that enhance that. And fortunately, that it is actually common between all database engines. When we define that it is the SQL Server, our solution we are going to follow through this unit. But if we change the database engine, the same technology will be valid still. It is not a context of the SQL Server property here. We are going to see the specificities related to the SQL Server too. But technologies help us interact means we are going to either send requests or retrieve resources, so they account for all database management systems. من عندها اعتراض. الهنوف. Any objections? آية. Maisa, any questions?
What is the question?
عندكم اعتراض على ما قلته تو؟
No.
ايش اللي قلته وقلته؟ ايش هو اللي النوم؟ Maisa, what did I say right now? ميسة أريد إجابة. ماذا قلت أنا الآن؟ زين جايين متأخر وما تجاوبوا. Okay. Let's just have a first look. The first thing to define through this unit, which is the understanding databases and the work with databases, actually would have 100% client-server architecture whenever we build an application or a project that uses a database in background. Remember the tier presentation, or let's say the architecture we saw when we defined a graphical view of the dynamic web applications we may design. We have a client and we have a server in background and we have tiers in between. Whatever. The client server, it is one of the most, not the most, but it is a must to go through to build a database-based solution. You want to build a dynamic web application that uses a database in background. So the architecture, it's a client-server architecture. Without thinking. The client server, why? Because we have a client, which is the browser, and we have a server, which is the database management system. The client sends a request to the server, to the database management system. The management system, the database management system, search for response and sends it back to the client. This way, actually, we would be able to store resources and give them to all clients whenever requested. The process would be common for all the requests that they are actually whenever they are similar. So it is not to give response to one client only, but no,
Mr.
to serve all clients. Yeah, tell me.
يعني the client والserver is together to
ده صوت متقطع. Heidi, what did you say?
The client server is work together.
They work together.
To
They are
send
not
and receive.
Yeah, exactly. The client is your browser.
Yeah.
The client متصفح. The server is the, in our context, he is the DBMS, the database management system. Why? Because it holds your databases. It holds your data you need for finishing the work or the services you want to deliver through the application. So the client sends to the server, and the server processes and sends back. Who is the client? Or the browser, they can actually process, or let's say help you to display the APIs, the ASP.NET pages, to help the client receive a response. The browsers in general, all of them, they are compatible for. I'll stop at this level. I'll stop at this level. I'll stop the recording also. If you hear your name, please say yes. I'm going to take the attendance.